free. There you go, Chuck. Mark Doris brought up a great question earlier, and we'll readdress it right now. Mark Doris is about to hire a non-agent to go put out marketing pieces for him, David. And he was asking, how do you pay? And I said, yeah, you definitely want David's version of this because it needs to be incentive driven. And went in the horrifically long explanation of how many times you and I have had coaching students tell us that they put out hundreds of tags and gotten zero response. And it always comes down to, well, I had someone from my office putting out marketing pieces.
Yeah, so I'm trying to recall how we pay. So I think the way that we do it is that I found out when I paid hourly and I paid per tag, I didn't get very good return on my investment. I paid for a lot of tags and didn't get a lot of calls. And I think that there's a correlation between what people say they do and what people do. Okay, there's something missing there. So what I found is that if we pay for performance. So the way that we do it is we do $10 per phone call to the call center. So if they just call the call center, they get a $10 bill from me. Okay. If the call center, if they make an appointment and they keep the appointment, we pay another $15 for kept appointments. And then if we get a listing agreement or a purchase agreement, then we pay another $100. And then if it ends up in escrow, then we pay, I think, another $125 when we close. And that's how we do it. We make them partners in our success. So they're interested in keeping track of the results and going from. That's just somebody who's their only job is to do tagging. And we found that works pretty well, because if you think about it, if they put 20 tags out, call it 2 hours of work, okay, maybe a little more depending on how far they're driving to get to the territory. But 2 hours of work, they put 20-hour tags out, they should get 4 calls. That's $40. If 3 of them make appointments and 2 of them are kept, then that's another $30. And then if we so that's $70 for 2-3 hours worth of work, which is not hard to get somebody to do. And then and then it's just upside if you end up going deeper into a transaction with that client. We find it worked just fine.
There you go. Mr. Pavoni, our first real East Coast representative using the monster. We're in the process of creating the criteria for new leads for our CRM. How many fields do you recommend for follow-up once they call our phone service? It's an interesting question.
I don't understand the question. How many fields?
How many fields? So he's asking how many follow-up sequences should actually occur. It's an interesting CRM question. How many follow-ups should occur once you've had a face-to-face, once you've had the call? So you've got a face-to-face, you've got second appointment if you've done it correctly, things of that nature. Is there a round number, or is yours kind of endless on that follow-up cycle, David?
Okay. What I do is once I've met them, and assuming I get an email, which we're trying to get through the call center by offering them alternatives to foreclosure. So one of the things we say in our script is we have, would you like to get our alternatives to foreclosure information along with your appointment confirmation? And they oftentimes say yes. And we say, great, what's your email address? And then we get their email address and we send it with a confirmation email. Now, I used to be a fan of confirming appointments and that kind of thing, and I just don't anymore unless I don't want to go to the appointment. If I'm supposed to be there on Friday afternoon and I'm tired and I decided I don't really want to mess with that appointment Friday afternoon, I can be certain I don't have to go just by calling to confirm the appointment, because they'll have they either won't answer the phone to confirm, or I'll get them on the phone and they'll say, you know what, never mind. And they'll cancel, or they'll say, you know what, today's not good, call me next week, and then you can never get them back on the phone again. So because I found that if I confirm or I don't confirm the appointment, it seems to be the same rate of show. I mean, about 50 to 75% of the time, they're going to be there when they say, and 25 to 50% of the time, they're going to be a no-show, even when I confirmed it. So whether or not I confirm or don't confirm, I'm getting the same success rate. So I just go now, okay, or we just send them, to go now. And then once we meet them, then we start a weekly follow-up. Now, more often, if necessary, depends on the intensity of the, where we are in helping them. But if it's just a casual follow-up, there's no commitment, they want to walk through their options, they want to try to get a loan mod first, then it's one email a week, one phone call a week. And the email that we're sending them is from out of the Advocate marketing system, which is a 21 email campaign, which is an individual chapter of and a link to a book that I edited called Defeat Foreclosure. And then we also use what we call the weekly lender questionnaire. And at that first or second meeting, we are teaching the homeowner how to call the bank each week, ask these questions, and get them to call us. And so if they don't call us, so I'm saying, well, when are you going to talk to the bank? And they say, I'll call them tomorrow. And I said, would you call me and let me know what they say? And they say yes, and then they don't call me. So I call them the next day. And so when I call them, I'm not calling them, hey, are you ready to list? I'm calling them and saying, hey, what happened when you talked to the bank? And if it's good news, I'm encouraging. If it's no news, I'm saying, well, make sure you call again next week and call me with the results. And if it's bad news, I say, well, let's take a look at it and see if we can retweak your application or look at the other options that might be available to you and schedule another face-to-face meeting. And we keep inching closer and closer and closer to the deal.
There you go. Pete Sanchez. This is an interesting question, Pete, because I've gone down a bunny hole on this topic. Should I give the backstory or the Pete question first in the bunny hole, David? It's up to you because I'm always interested in your feedback. Pete Sanchez's question is, I've been seeing an increase in BKs getting filed to buy more time. Should we continue to follow up with these leads? How do we handle the objection? I'm already doing bankruptcy to keep my home. Now, the reason I bring that up, there was an article that just came out on Seeking Alpha, a very popular website for the investing people, called Market Crash 2.0, written by, I'll put it on the screen for a second, written by David Haggett. He called last summer sort of the break on the arc, and what he's calling a housing crash, to be termed more correctly, is a decline in the value of property, right? That's all he's talking about. He's not talking about the complete and global Titanic thing that happened previously where banks went under. Those are byproducts of devaluation of property. And I went through his whole article and he's saying we're definitely there. But one of the facts he brings up, to Pete Sanchez's point, and I saw this at the, here's the question, David, and with bankruptcies and things of this nature, there seemed to be a steep drop off in the number of people that were delinquent in the fourth quarter that weren't there in the third quarter. I mean, by percentage numbers. Now, I haven't seen the final fourth quarter numbers, but based on what he's pointing out in this article and based on Pete's question, I'm wondering how much bankruptcy comes into play with deciding who's technically delinquent anymore, and how much loan modifications, which I don't know, are they considering them performing or non-performing assets, really skewing what was a fairly steep decline, and everybody's seen it. As of December and January, there are quote unquote fewer foreclosures, the numbers have come down, blah, blah, blah. But there is this tremendous increase in bankruptcies and loan modifications. I think those numbers correlate. I don't have any, other than looking at these charts and graphs and everything I've been looking at all morning, that's the only thing I have to back it up by. I went one step further, David, and I've said this before. Most of you, if you didn't know this, I felt that the crash, based on where I was looking at it while I was working at the bank, started in and around Ohio. So I Googled that fact, and there is a record number of bankruptcies and underwater properties happening in Ohio. Now, I'm not saying we're in a crash. I'm just saying properties eventually have to come down in value. Going back to the point, bankruptcies, David, how much does it come into play when you're mitigating short sales? How often do you encounter clients that are doing it? How do you handle them as a lead source?
Well, first of all, if I see that their foreclosure is postponed because of bankruptcy, I skip them. And the reason that we skip them is that they've generally lawyered up, and it's really tough to penetrate their lawyer's advice, the person that they're paying too much to help them. So, I mean, that's my policy. Now, if I get in there and then I realize that they're, doing bankruptcy, then I just kind of roll with, the punches, and I just treat it like I treat everybody else. I don't make any exception other than talk to them about the pros and cons of it and where the bankruptcy is going to stop it. But here's what the bank could do, and this is what could happen. And we just go back and forth about the pros and cons of bankruptcy protection and how that's not a solution. It's just buying you more time. While you're under the protection of bankruptcy, you need to be trying to figure out how to keep your house if that's what your goal is, or how to get the equity out of the walls of your house, or whatever the situation is versus their objective. And we just talk to them that way. It's just a straight ahead conversation, nothing special really.
There you go. What are your feelings on the market at this moment while we're actually on this topic, David? What is your, and again, I'll say it because I look from a global perspective. David looks at a California/Conejo Valley perspective. What is your general feeling with homeowners when you talk to them? Going back to the chart, certainly confidence in buyers and sellers seems to be declining. That doesn't seem to be an overstated fact.
Well, the short sales are declining?
Well, no. What is your general pulse for homeowners you're encountering and their feelings towards the market?
We've seen a resurgence in buyer activity the last few weeks, particularly the last couple of weeks. So the seller activity came first. So as soon as we got past Christmas, we saw huge virtual activity in buyer and seller activity. Then we started seeing a lot more listings, and now the buyers are following the listings, and we're seeing a lot more buyers beginning to enter the market. And it looks like the spring selling season is starting, which is very good, a little earlier than we expected. So I'm anticipating a pretty good spring or summer selling season. What we don't know is how many listings we're going to actually have on the market and whether or not buyer demand is going to support that or not. That's what we don't know. But so far, so good. We're off to a good start. We're seeing that the new listings that are coming on the market are coming on the market at the adjusted price. The market pulled back 3 to 5% over the last 12 to 14 months. So we're seeing the new listings coming on at using the new comps, and they're selling right away. And we're seeing the old listings, those stagnant, old, high days on market properties, they're still not selling because the sellers aren't willing to adjust their price to where the market is, and they're expiring off the market at unprecedented rates. I mean, in my market, the over $1 million market space, 40% of listings are expiring, withdrawing, or canceling off the market unsold. So I've never seen levels like that before. So what we saw last year was inventory going up, days on market going up, prices coming down, sellers beginning to compete to discount prices in order to sell, where for years we've had buyers competing to raise prices. We saw for the first time in years that sellers were competing to reduce prices, and now we seem to be leveling off. And the market, we're anticipating the market in terms of market appreciation to be flat to slightly up or flat to slightly down, depending on the price range. The lower the price range, the greater the appreciation is going to be. So we're anticipating what is likely to be the most normal buying selling cycle that we've seen since 2011. So I think it bodes well for both buyers and sellers, and good agents and good investors. A little stabilization